This is the Everyone's Agnostic Podcast with Cass Midgley.
We interview people you don't know about a subject no one wants to talk about. We hope to encourage people in the process of deconstructing their faith and help curb the loneliness that accompanies it. We think the world is a better place when more people live by sight, not by faith. Please subscribe to our podcast and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, you can support us monetarily in 2 easy ways. You can pledge
$1 million
or more through Patreon. That's patreon.com/EA podcast, or leave a lump sum donation through PayPal at our website, everyone'sagnostic.com. The smallest contribution is greatly appreciated.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 225 of the Everyone's Agnostic Podcast. I'm Cass Midgley. I'm going to die. A big thanks to each and every one of our Patreon and PayPal supporters. My guest today is Matthew O'Neil. Bob and I had Matthew on back in March of 2017, episode 142. Matthew is a prolific writer, an activist, theologian, and teacher. He has an M.A. in theology from St. Michael's College and is a certified humanist chaplain and celebrant, which means he can marry and bury in a secular way, like myself. He's the author of What the Bible Really Does and Doesn't Say About Sex, the how, when, and why, and with whom of scriptural prohibitions and permissions. Also, Afterlife, Solving Science and Religion's Great Disagreement. Also, Adam and Eve, questioning the historicity of biblical human origins. And You Say That I Am, Jesus and the Messianic Problem. And another one called Judas. Obviously, he's very prolific. His latest is a book called Attrition, and it's his first fictional book. It sheds light on the awful nature of the God character in the Bible, as well as playing on the ideas of free will and determinism. Matthew and I both earned master's degrees in theology as atheists because we're fascinated with something that a large chunk of the human population believes to be true, and we did too at one time, and yet has no evidential basis to be true. We humans need certain things to be true, and we seek out information that supports our beliefs. It's called confirmation bias, and we all do it. But Christians especially seem to build an imaginary fortress around their hearts and minds and place sentries along the walls to keep out threatening truths that might reveal that the emperor has no clothes and Christianity has no foundation, nor is there a fortress. But I think you're going to like Matthew and how he explores these things from a very academic and intellectual perspective. So, did you miss me? I missed you. It's been 2 weeks since we've connected. It's our first gap from our weekly shows in years, and it felt weird. I both liked it because I got a break, and I didn't like how it felt because I had so much to say, and I think maybe my identity and my validation is determined by having a platform where I fucking feel like Trump sometimes as far as how much I need these rallies. And then I throw up a little bit in my mouth. But this is the new thing. This is how it's going to be. This is our pace for at least a while. We'll see where this takes us. I don't know. Some of you may have noticed that someone put a rocket booster on the social media aspect of this podcast. My friend and former guest on this show, Marie Delafont, volunteered to come on board and help. And my God, is she a force of nature. She's injected nitrous oxide into this enterprise. She's also co-hosting with me on occasion, including the next episode in 2 weeks. And I'm very grateful for her and her passion and her work ethic. She's truly amazing. This week I woke up in the middle of the night. Maybe sometimes you guys do this. And you have this wild, crazy thought. And you want to remember it, and you just in that moment are sure that you're going to. And then when you wake up, you're like, it's lost. It's gone. It was just weird. But those are some really interesting, fascinating moments that if you can capture them, can reveal some quacky stuff. So this is me. I taped myself thinking some crazy thoughts, barely lucid, groggy, and rather sure of myself. I mean, when you're in that moment, you think, oh, I see clearly, and it makes total sense to me. And only later, when you're sane and awake and reasonable, do you go, that's some bullshit, and some weird bullshit at that. In fact, I shared it with Marie, and she said, well, it's either brilliant or you were high. I don't know. But it's fun, and I thought I'd share it, and it inspired me to think some things, and so I'm going to play it for you. This is me in bed at 3 a.m., and then, after I'm done playing it, I'm going to reflect on its iteration, and it's even weirder than the dream state. Okay, just some thoughts about the Big Bang. We talk about it being something coming from nothing. It's not nothing, it's just not moving. It's a rock, which means it's fully contained and not moving. Not moving away, not bouncing around. And so the explosion just sends us all in different directions, and all we've been trying to do ever since is get back to the rock, to unity, to connectivity. Everything we do, whether it's eating or sex or socializing, is wanting connectivity, not only because we're pack animals, because actually there's a tension in us that resists other people. I just think about the senses, eat and smell, that we're repulsed by the same smells that we're attracted to, and that there's a constant tension. The fight or flight brain says, don't trust anyone, and that part of us that wants to go back to the Big Bang and to go back inside the womb and to be somehow connected and unified and solid with others again is equally, if not more, strong. That counters the fear. I mean, we want to be seen, and we're horrified at the thought of being seen. And so the schizoid, really, nature of man is what keeps us bouncing like an atom inside itself. There is no rest. Oh, and I know that there's others who have said this, and I could research it so that I don't sound like I'm espousing that I'm the only one. But instead of that, I'm just going to say I'm not the only one. And I'm just theorizing. And theories get thrown at us all the time, and just from people expressing how they feel. Like whoever wrote Row Your Boat was theorizing that life is but a dream, and that gently floating downstream provoked that theory in the passenger of that rowboat, gently flowing with the current, barely having to work, sliding along with no bumps and no noise even. It just reveals that all of this might not be really happening. Not that life is our dream, but what if our life is someone else's dream? If someone were to ask me what the most central and solid truth is, I would say this: life is hard. Everything we do is in some way a form of coping with its hardness. 24 hours a day, even sleeping. But awake, we're working to give ourselves meaning, but even more important, money. Laughing to stay sane, learning to add tools to our belt, skills to propel us forward and above the pack, drugs, alcohol, religion, porn to make us forget how hard life is, constantly hurling through space. Ever since the Big Bang, when our slumber was interrupted, when our unity, connectedness, and oneness and belonging were blasted into a billion pieces, hurling through space at the speed of light, we're wanting back there. And scientists say we're both expanding and contracting. I get that. Every atom always moving, gyrating, bouncing and bounding, the nucleus full of positively charged particles and negative charges surrounding it, just like our lives. Electrons move in empty spaces of an atom, in set orbits, sleep, wake, eat, shit, work, play, fuck, read, watch TV, sleep, wake, eat, shit, work, play, fuck, read, watch TV, sleep, wake, eat. You get the idea. They say even the atoms of a wooden table are always moving, but never touching. We never touch anything. Particles are, by very nature, attracted to particles with an opposite charge, and they repel other similarly charged particles. Reminds me of those magnets I used to play with as a kid. Sometimes they attract, sometimes they repel. This prevents electrons from ever coming into direct contact, in an atomic sense and literal sense. Their wave packets, whatever the fuck that is, can overlap, but never touch. In fact, nothing ever touches anything. We try, we press, we make love, we wrestle, we hug, we dance, always moving, never touching. We attract and repel. We have a love-hate relationship with everything. With our partners, with our kids, with our jobs, with our cars, with the weather, with our clothes. We delightfully bask in the warmth of the sun as it burns our skin and creates cancer. When we're tired of being alone, we crave being with loved ones, only to soon crave being alone for the fatigue of being together. We hate human smells, and we love them. We love onions and hate armpit odor. We're repelled by skunk smell, but love the smell of coffee. We hate the smell of farts, but we eat hard-boiled eggs. And we rarely pinch our nose at our own farts. We eat cheese that smells like smegma. And what's our relationship to fish? Why does our blood taste like iron? Are we the elements of the universe? Are we the periodic table, dirt and rocks and metal and fungus? Are we shattered stardust that misses its mommy? The pre-Big Bang warmth of our womb? To nurse at the teat of the cosmos? Separation anxiety, abandonment issues. Why do we try to get inside each other with our tongues and fingers and dicks and dildos? Why are we comforted by large bodies of water, by the ebb and flow of the tide, by going underwater in the amniotic fluid of the silent cosmos and the muffled beating of our mother's hearts? What do we need from each other? Why are we always lacking something? Something's always missing. We're always missing something. What's the snack I'm craving? What's that emotion I miss? What need was temporarily met by that person who's no longer in my life? That song, that career, all fleeting and unpredictable like the wind. The wind that makes trees hiss and also rips them out of the ground. We're afraid of the dark and drawn to the light, chilled by the cold, warmed by the fire. Does nothing ever stop? Is it always push and pull, in and out, high and low? No wonder all animals have to sleep every night. It's exhausting being alive, like clothes tossed around in the dryer, the tumbling 24-hour cycle of our rotating Earth and her annual trips around the sun, the gyroscope motion of the planets and the atoms inside a pinhead, always moving, never stopping, never touching. Even our sleep, our minds are creating stories and fantasies and horrors and sex scenes where the push-pull of intercourse is desperate to get deeper inside another in a primal dance between power and vulnerability, tenderness and violence, pleasure and pain, and out of these frictions of rubbing two sticks together or flint rock on steel, a star is born. A seed finds its egg, and it all starts over again in a climax of fireworks and big bangs and booms, in the unending, unpredictable thrashing of wind and rain, fire and ice, time and space, work and play, laughter and tears, grief and elation, life and death, generation after generation, now worm food in the earth, in a compost made rich by the carbon salad of every plant, animal, insect, human, and bird who died in that very spot and rotted, making space for new life that will crave to be together with those we love and at war with those we fear. But the show must go on. I go to work tomorrow. I make small talk tomorrow. I eat, shit, and sleep tomorrow, just like today, over and over again, until my consciousness stops in a long-awaited rest that I will not experience. And my skin, this skin that I can smell on my forearm and feel the little hairs in my nose and the muscle and bone underneath, will contribute to the cycle of life until the next Big Bang, when the sun explodes. Yeah, life is hard, but it's all there is. I'm literally nothing without it. And so here we find ourselves. Big picture perspectives like this make me love you. Make me love me. Help me forgive you and me. Provokes me to laugh at you and myself and all of us and everything. Maybe the best advice from a silly source that was entirely lost on me. Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 merrily. Life is but a dream. Is it any wonder that we sing that song in the round? We taped this conversation on October 17th, 2018. The intro music is by Dave Weckl, called Just Groove Me. The segue music on this episode is Handyman by AWOL Nation. Thanks for listening, and be a yes-sayer to what is.
Hello.
Hey.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going good. How are you, Matt?
Doing all right, thank you. Do you want me to turn on video, or are we...
I turned it on at first just to say hi.
Okay.
You go by Matt or Matthew? I can't remember.
I'll answer to either.
Okay.
Whatever's easiest for you.
All right. And remind me where you're calling from.
Well, the last time we talked, I was in Vermont, but this summer I actually moved to Charlotte, North Carolina.
Okay, cool. You like it there?
I do.
I was just there a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, I should have. I had no way of knowing you were there, but I spent a couple of lonely nights in a hotel. I would have enjoyed a beer or two.
Yeah.
So what took you there?
My two children, both are on the autism spectrum.
Okay.
Charlotte is supposed to have some of the best services in the country, so moved down here to help get them treatment and just help them with developmental needs. So yeah, that's basically it.
Okay. How long you been there again?
Since July.
Okay. Yeah, the last time we had you on, I had a co-host, Bob Pondillo. He moved to Madison, Wisconsin, and left me high and dry. But I'll tell you what, he was, when you emailed us the first time and kind of gave us a link to your books and everything, Bob read your book. I did not, confession. And I'm telling you, Bob is tough. For one thing, he's a PhD college professor in mass communications. He grades essays. He's retired now, but he's graded thousands of essays.
Sure.
He's a massive reader, like a crazy reader. And no shit, he loved your book. And we've had other authors on, but honestly, I'd never seen him as enthusiastic as he was about your writing. Wow. Seriously. He was impressed, and that's saying a lot. So
that's a huge compliment. I appreciate that.
Yeah, he was really full of praise for the way you turned a phrase and your writing. So,
thank you.
Once again, I have not read the new one. So let's just, instead of maybe just a little brief, were you ever a Christian?
Oh, yeah, I absolutely was. I grew up in a very strict Catholic household. I was one of 10, if that's any indication.
Wow.
Actually, the first question that people ask me whenever I tell them that is, am I Mormon?
Yeah.
But no, Catholic. The last name's sort of a dead giveaway. I went to public school, but when I went to college, I went to a private Catholic college, and that's actually where I earned my master's degree from. Got it in theology, but I studied it having already left the faith and wanted to know more about it. So
I remember that now, and I did the same thing. I got a master's in theological studies as an atheist, as a post-Christian, or at least agnostic at the time. I don't know if I was full-blown atheist, but I am now. But I too am fascinated with the human need for purpose and meaning and grand narratives. And I wanted to be able to talk about it with some credentials behind my name.
Yeah.
And we both have masters in theology.
Yeah. Pretty unique thing.
What's your birth order?
Oh, I am number 5 of the 10. So I'm right smack in the middle.
Yeah. So just a lot of our listeners, they have conflict with their siblings or with their family. How much tension did your leaving the faith create in your family?
I would say at first it didn't create a whole lot of tension, especially among my siblings. Like none of them have openly stated that they are anything other than Christian, with the exception of one of my siblings. However, my older brother, the one born right before me, he is the only other one having ever openly stated, I don't believe, I'm an atheist. And he did it long before I did. I remember when he did that, I had a huge conflict with that, but I just never brought it up with him because I loved him so much that it didn't matter to me.
Yeah.
But with my other siblings, when I had conversations with them around religion, they were all more or less on the same page as me after I had left the faith. And though I wasn't open about discussing it with them, after I had pursued my degree and started writing books, my very first book that I released was one stating that Jesus was not the Messiah. Right out the gate, I was just like, I'm going to go ahead and make this bold claim and show this evidence, for it. It was then that the conflict started to sort of pile up. One of probably the most heartbreaking moments for me was after I had written the book. It's called You Say That I Am, and it's about the issue with identifying Jesus as the Messiah. My parents were visiting me and my family, and the box showed up that had the books in it. And I was so excited. And I ripped it open, and, my dad teaches English literature. I grew up learning about all these authors he admired and, was really into writing. I know my dad has written a book, but he refuses to send it out for publication because he thinks that no one's going to be interested in it. But so I thought, oh, this is a huge deal. My dad's here when I got this book, and this is my first book. I'm so I'm the only one in my family to have anything published in this format. So I showed him the book. I was like, look, here, take a copy. And he looked at it, sort of glanced at the back, and then just put it on the table behind him and didn't say anything else about it.
Oh, no.
And that crushed me.
Absolutely.
I was so, my parents and I still carried on a cooperative, amicable relationship after that, but it's still sort of stung to go over, and there's the pictures of, my other siblings doing these amazing things, all these accomplishments, and, where's the books that I've written? But so that's really when the conflict started to arise.
Yeah.
And the less I was willing to sort of stop talking about the issues I had with religion and stop publishing the work that I have on religion, that's when more conflict started coming up with my siblings and me, because it created so much tension between my parents and myself. So, I guess the long story short is initially didn't have a whole lot, but then once I started being more active with my writing and getting more ideas out there, that's when it created more problems.
For sure. Well, that's sane, man. And come on, every son, probably every daughter for that matter, just craves the affirmation of the Father. I love those. Here's the music to our ears. I'm so proud of you.
Yeah.
And there's that moment where he has a chance to hit a home run in your heart. And, oh, gosh, that hurts, man.
Yeah.
Just to see the picture of him laying it back down on the table and changing the subject or something.
And that's not to say, like, I haven't had other moments where my dad has told me he's proud of me. It's just, I really thought, like you said, I was going to get that home run then, and it didn't happen.
Well, and in some ways, you became an activist almost. I mean, you're out there, and you're making a difference, and you're pushing, you're speaking truth to power, I guess, in many ways. How many books now?
This is my 6th book that I've just released.
Yeah, so you're prolific. How many? What was the year that the first one came out?
First one came out in 2014.
4 years, 6 books. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
That's hard work. And is that what you make a living doing that?
I make a little bit of a living doing it. It's not my full-time gig yet. I mean, maybe one day it will be, but certainly with the family to feed and all that. And my name needs to be a little more well-known before I start saying, yeah, I'm a writer for my career. So
yeah. So what do you do?
Oh boy. So
well, we don't have to go there. It's kind of one of those stupid American questions that
No. It's totally okay. So the last time we talked, I was living in Vermont, where I had a career as a social worker, and I had mentioned to you beforehand. My family moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, because we're getting services for our children who are on the autism spectrum. So the problem with transferring to a new state, much like a lawyer moving to a different state, is that, your certification or your license doesn't transfer over to the new state. So, so right now I'm basically doing internship type works to earn hours so I can get recertified in North Carolina. I have to accrue about 200 hours before I do that. So in the meantime, I'm doing odd jobs to sort of earn money. I'm doing the Uber and Lyft routine, but I'm working back towards getting a certification so I can do more social work down here. But I'm very close to going back to work doing what I was doing before with counseling. And I'm looking forward to doing that again.
Well, good for you. I mean, you did something for your kids, and it took a big hit, and you're driving a Uber. That's just really noble. Way to go.
You got to do what you got to do. And, it's what's right for the bigger and better cause isn't necessarily what I want to do, but it's something I have to do. So,
there you go.
Yeah.
And you probably need to live there 6 months or something, right, to have citizenship? Or
6 months.
Yeah. All right, so let's get into the book. This one, am I correct? I think we talked, and I'm remembering that this one's fiction?
Yes, so this is my first fiction book, but still within the realm of discussing atheism and philosophy and those types of ideologies.
Yeah, all right. Do you happen to have one handy?
I can pull up the PDF really quick, absolutely.
Well, I like it like on NPR when they have the author read a section.
Okay. Is there a particular section you were hoping for me?
I'll let you choose because I haven't read it, so I'm ill-equipped.
So do you want me to give any sort of introduction to what I'm about to read or any sort of...
Yeah, just help bring us up to speed.
Sure. So with this book, one of the bigger issues I really wanted to tackle was the issue with the God character from the Bible, because I think people don't really grasp when they talk about certain things how horrific the character really is. Mm-hmm. I used to teach religion in a Catholic middle school, and I remember overhearing one of the teachers explaining to the students the 10 plagues in the book of Exodus, because the student, as anyone who has any sense of morality would ask, why would God do these awful things to the Egyptians? Why couldn't he just free the slaves without, killing the firstborn and turning the river to blood and all this and that?
Right.
And the other teacher had explained, God gave them chances, and, it was for 40 years that they were imprisoned. And remember, it was the Jews, it was God's chosen people. And so there was all this it was like listening to modern day Trump supporters with all the horrific things that he's done. It's like, well, he's like this, and well, like these people have done this. It's like, well, and so anyway, the long story short is, can we call a character who is like the God of the Bible all good and, well-meaning for everyone? So,
well, let me just say that's like the most lame apologetics, right? And bless their hearts, because they've got to defend that. Yeah. And I think Americans, but I don't know, mostly people of faith have become expert compartmentalizers.
Absolutely.
They have to.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
And the thing about, it's not only that testament or that story, but in the New Testament, Romans 9, Paul addresses this. And I remember one of my friends in college, he and I read Romans 9, and it said, God hardened Pharaoh's heart. It wasn't just Pharaoh was the one saying, no, I'm not going to let my people go, and therefore God had to do a second, third, fourth, fifth plague or some kind of, tragedy. It was God planned it from the beginning. So it becomes even more evil. Like,
absolutely.
This is him showing off. This is him flexing his muscles. This is gross.
No, you're absolutely right. And, people overlook those things. Even if we were to assume that, the God character was doing these things for, let's say it's, someone's between a rock and a hard place and they have to make a decision. We'll, use the, the philosophical issue of the trolley problem. Mm-hmm. Do you let it run over? Yeah, it's like, do you let it run over 4 people or pull the switch and let it run over 1 person,
Yeah.
But even in that circumstance, it's not as easy to make those decisions, and it's not as easy to justify when you're the one having to make those decisions, or if you're right there witnessing it happening,
Yeah.
So,
but that's not the case. This isn't. Yeah. This is not even just. This is not even fair.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right, we got set up.
So, all right. So the basic setup to let everyone know what's going on with this book, I set it up where the main character's name is Deborah Esther. It basically starts off right in the middle of the conflict. She wakes up and she's tied up in a prison cell with no concept of how she gets there. But she is in this small prison cell with another individual, character who later reveals himself. His name is Joshua. And for those who have some familiarity with the Bible, at least with the characters, the names in themselves should give away some of the plot of the story, because it turns out that this character, Joshua, can actually travel through time. And more importantly, this Joshua character, it's not his real name, but he gives it as his name to help her identify him and, just a hurdle to overcome. But he tells her, I'm the figure that the character God in the Bible is based off of. Mm-hmm. And he explains it. So, going back to Exodus and the 10 plagues, he explains in a way that contemporary scientists have said, if something like what's explained in Exodus actually happened, here's how it would have happened, in the river, like these, microbes take over and it turns the water red. And then that gas escapes into the air and people get boils from it. Frogs will come out of the water to survive. Dead fish will pop up. So it's like there's all these legitimate explanations for how it happens. And so he says, basically, knowing when it was going to happen, I explained to the Egyptians, if you don't do this, these things are going to happen. And then they happen. An actual real historical situation like this happened where Christopher Columbus, when he landed in Central America, was trying to get supplies from the natives there, from the indigenous people. And he knew a lunar eclipse was coming up. And he said, if you don't do these things for me, if you don't give me what I want, my God's going to take the moon out of the sky. And they were so horrified when a week later that happened that they gave him everything that he needed. So
I've never heard that story.
Yeah.
Wow.
So something like that has actually happened. So anyway, this character sets himself up as, I am God of the Bible, and I'm a time traveler. And there's a number of sort of philosophical issues that come through here, because the book deals heavily with determinism and free will. And I have been doing a lot of studies into astrophysics. I bought a lecture series by Sean Carroll on the concept of time and is time travel possible. And there's a couple of sort of ways to look at it. So if time travel is possible, one, if we, were to go back in time like the characters in my book do, if you mess anything up while, if you go back in time and do the grandfather paradox, you go back in time, shoot your grandfather before he meets your grandmother or has your parents, then how are you born? Well, in this timeline where you go back and kill your grandfather, an alternate universe appears and, time continues on just without you, without your parents, without your grandparents' relationship. Another alternate to that is if time travel is possible, you would be prevented from doing anything other than what has already happened. Or in other words, if we go back in time and it's a single timeline that we're on, any action that you take is supposed to happen. And that's more or less the perspective I took in my book, which is anything that the characters are brought to, any situation like that, whatever happens is supposed to happen, or it's supposed to happen a certain way. It's actually part of the conflict is the main character is tempted to run away, to escape from certain scenes, to stop certain characters from being killed or being harmed. And Joshua, the God figure, tells her, no, you can't do that, because if you do, it splits off into a different timeline and we're going to be lost and not be able to get back to the one where you actually exist. So there's all these sort of conflicts thrown in. But
wow.
Yeah.
Well, I love the concept of the multiverse, that somewhere, there's a universe where, I didn't have an accident in my car, or I didn't marry my wife, or, there's, I don't know. It's just freaky. It's kind of the, It's a Wonderful Life, type thing. Yeah,
exactly. So, I mean, in some alternate universe, Jimmy Stewart, didn't survive, what is it? He fell through through some ice, or he wasn't born. Was that it? I don't know. But,
when he was about to commit suicide, I think.
Oh, that's right. So he's not born. His brother falls through the ice, and then all those guys in the military end up dying, and his wife never meets him and is a nun, or lives in solitude or something. So you want me to read some of the book I got here?
Give us a taste.
Okay. So this is the third chapter in, and this is when some of the more biblical references come up. So in this situation, Deborah is brought to the scene of Abraham and Isaac.
Wait, she in real time, she's there? She's time traveled to that place?
She is brought to that time and place where Abraham and Isaac are.
Okay, got it.
Okay, so here we go. Chapter 3. Deborah gasped as her vision focused on a figure. Though he seemed to be only a few feet in front of her, he was not only far away, but from far before. A Middle Eastern-looking man, roughly 30 years old. He had a long beard and hair curled in an intricate pattern across his skull. He was dressed in a purple robe with golden sash, his arms raised above his head. They looked strong, well-defined, but they shook furiously over his head. On a pillar in front of him, structured of stone and long wooden branches in a wobbly rectangular shape, lay a young girl. No more than 12, maybe 13. Her gown was white. She had a round fruit stuck in her mouth, drool trickling down her cheek, and rope around her waist and ankles. Whimpering softly, she moaned a single word over and over while looking up at the man. Baba, Baba. Deborah held out her hand and started to run towards them. Wait, said Joshua, and Deborah stopped. Have you ever heard of the grandfather paradox? She glanced over her shoulder at Joshua. No, she responded, looking back and forth at Joshua and the young girl. Baba came the only sound from the figures. Deborah swore she had started to hear the man sobbing. The grandfather paradox, Joshua continued, is when a person travels back in time and kills their own grandfather. The problem is, if you kill your grandfather before your grandparents procreate, then how would you be alive and go back to kill him? Deborah's mind pieced together the statement while preparing her body to bolt towards the altar. She turned and bore her eyes into Joshua's. So are these my great-grandparents to the 10th degree, she asked. If I stop that guy from killing her, how does that affect me? Like you wouldn't believe, Joshua jeered. They don't have to be related to you. By stopping that action, by creating any action within a timeline that you haven't already otherwise been involved in, even if it's just taking in a breath of air, that completely alters the entire course of human history. He shrugged his shoulders. Fuck, maybe you'd have a boyfriend. She didn't ignore Joshua, but she wasn't listening anymore. What long-term consequence would this have? Would she even be here, stuck in the cell? Would she be alive? How risky do you want to be? Joshua asked. The man dropped to his knees, dropping the knife next to the girl. Baba, she cried. A loud, painful moan soared out from behind the altar. Deborah watched as the arms flexed and the man, flinching his face in a painful grimace, pulled himself up. Gasping, the man appeared to be a crumpled version of a real human being. What's that the poor girl is saying? Joshua sneered. Let's figure this out. Middle Eastern, full beard, clearly in ancient time, wearing purple, which suggests a figure of power or royalty, and one specifically in the Semitic region that would be or was Israel. So hey, an ancient Jew, right? Deborah's eyes twitched as she attempted to peer at Joshua without his noticing. Her head shook slightly at the thought. That means she's speaking Hebrew, Joshua continued. You remember Hebrew, right, from your bat mitzvah? I don't think. No, I know you'll have no problem. This is some real basic beginner shit. It's one word. Just pretend. Abba. Deborah's face stretched out in every direction. Father. It was the girl's father. With a swift, arching swipe of his arm, the man screamed and slammed the knife into the girl's chest. All was silent but the heavy, slow inhale the little girl sucked in. After a moment, it gurgled. No, Deborah shrieked, running at the image, and the scene disappeared. Deborah struck the wall. Funny you mentioned that, Joshua announced. Deborah spun around and rushed at him. Fucking coward, she screamed. She was a mere yard from Joshua when he disappeared, and he suddenly felt two hands grip the back of her neck and waist. The force slammed her against the wall, and she felt her nose snap. Blood oozed down along her face. It was Josh, and he was pressing her against the wall. No, said Joshua, I'm fucking God. She spit a wad of blood out of her mouth. What? She panted, pressing back against Joshua. Do not ignore this one fact, beloved, that one day with the Lord is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years are like one day, Joshua whispered in her ear, and Deborah stopped pushing. That's 2 Peter 3:8, Joshua hissed in her ear, and that, he said, pointing at the wall, was Jephthah and his daughter.
Oh, man. Wow.
All right.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Oh, thank you. So I misspoke. Abraham and Isaac comes next, but
yeah, that's
the
Jephthah.
setup to that.
Well, I thought maybe in this case you made Isaac a woman.
No, I could have done that. And just,
Sure.
Oh, man, that would have been an interesting plot twist, but no.
All right. So that
does follow.
Well, and in a way, I just, we're getting to look kind of like the audiobook version there.
Yeah.
Do you have an audiobook version of it?
There will be an audiobook version coming.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's in production as we speak.
Okay. Well, a couple of things. One, this might be, because it's so biblical, it might be triggering for ex-Christians. But I think who it could appeal to, if they're brave enough, and of course, by definition, if they're kind of on the fence, if they're starting to entertain their own doubts, if they're one of those who are on the early stages of their own personal deconversion, this might be a good one for them, because it might push them over the edge, but whatever.
Yeah, maybe. That would be pretty awesome. I've had a couple of people tell me my work's helped them over the edge, so I don't mind a few more deconversions happening because of my work.
No. We don't set out to proselyte, but, if it happens, it happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, one of the things that that's fresh on my mind is I just got back from a retreat, and I call it that, which is also a triggering word probably for some Christians. But, we've been doing this show for 4.5 years, and people have, and because we interview people you don't know, talking about a subject no one wants to talk about. That's kind of the subtitle of the show. And so, unlike this week where I'm interviewing an author, most of the people I interview are just regular people, and they come under a pseudonym a lot of times because they're not out. But everybody's story is, truth is stranger than fiction, and it's worthwhile to hear other people's story, especially if where you're listening from is the South or some kind of environment where you feel extremely alone. You might even feel crazy for having left God, or even in the midst of entertaining your own doubts. So as a result, people have become friends, and mostly through a private Facebook site, all over the world, all over the English-speaking world. People are talking, and in some cases meeting together. There's a meeting that meets in the Netherlands from people that met through this show. And these communities form, and they just really benefit and love each other. And there's been enough of a groundswell of people saying, hey, let's do a retreat or, some kind of meeting over the weekend in some place and some central place. And so we did that this last weekend, and we met in a lodge in the Smoky Mountains of East Tennessee. And I think the furthest person was Spokane, Washington, but you also had Washington, D.C. and North Dakota and Kansas and, all over. And it was only 26 people, but it turned out to be an extremely magical time, and with no agenda. Like we literally we had one little check-in where we kind of went around a circle and introduced ourselves, and just spent the rest of the time just living life and meeting one another and hanging out and hiking and playing games and swimming and just it was amazing. So I say all that to say that this is fresh on my mind, that where do you find community, especially as you've relocated? I don't know if you ever valued the community that you experienced in your church, but for those of us that our community was the church. Our tribe was the church, and when we lost that, we lost not only our faith, but our friends. And, can you speak to that at all? What kind of community do you have?
Sure. So, when I left the faith, I wasn't really actively involved in a religious community to begin with. My marriage to my first wife sort of led to a dissolution between the community I had with the church I was involved in anyway, not because of the marriage necessarily, but because we tried to plan our wedding at the church that I had gone to and where I'd gone to school, and they just weren't willing to do it. They were very nitpicky, and I was still as someone who was probably more in the realm of deism than atheism at that point. Right. I was still I'll go to and do all these classes, and I'll come back and, go to church whenever you need me to. I was just I'll do whatever I want to do. I felt connected to that community. I felt like it was a big part of my life. And they were like, nah. And so It was just, yeah. And so I was really turned off by it. And it's not to say that that was the straw that broke the camel's back with me, but it made me really not want to be involved with the community anymore if that's how I was going to be treated. So yeah. I still had community. I still had a group of friends that I hung around with who were of similar mindsets, or at least who shared similar interests, who were I believe in God, so I'm not on the same page as you there, but it's not a big deal that you don't believe in God and yada, yada. So I still had a good community of friends. Yeah. But moving to the region I'm in now, the community that I have here are really my neighbors. I don't have a ton of strong connections right now outside of the people that I do my internship with and around, and some of the few connections I've made, like I said, either through the people I live around right now, my neighbors.
Proximity.
Yeah, exactly. And that's starting to expand. So it's for me, I've also connected with a father's parenting group in the area too. So I'm starting to make a couple connections through there too. So for me, it's mostly about finding connections with people with similar interests. I wouldn't doubt if there were people nearby who held a similar philosophical or religious position to me. But I haven't gone there yet because I feel, especially in a place where I'm in now, where there's, churches on every corner, people have bumper stickers that say, "Thank you, Jesus," or it's not what you know, but who you know, with a picture of Jesus on it. Yeah. I'm seeing a lot more of that. So there's a lot more, I would say, conservative and religious values openly expressed in this community. And so I'm not exactly comfortable going out and putting a Darwin fish on my car just yet.
Yeah, me neither. No, I don't. I don't have any stickers on my car. I just don't think that's the time or the place for it myself. But.
Yeah. I wouldn't want my car defaced anyway.
Exactly.
But it's one of those things too, where it's if it comes up, it comes up. And there's been a couple of connections I've made down here where it's just kind of come out in conversation, whether it's because the person feels comfortable enough to share it with me because we've had conversation and they've seen I share similar values to them.
Yeah.
Or they've, had a couple glasses of wine and they're just like, I don't go to church. I don't believe in any of that malarkey anyway. It's like, oh, well, in that case, let's talk.
Yeah.
So,
well, do you consider yourself an introvert?
I'm probably much more introverted in my in my age now than when I was in like college in my teen years. Yeah.
And what age are your boys?
I've got a 13-year-old. I have a 5-year-old girl and a 3-year-old boy.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Sorry about that. I thought there was
no,
two.
It's okay.
But there's
I
two.
never elaborated.
Yeah. Well, so your hands are full anyway. I mean, like, you're pretty spread thin, and it may not be a priority, but well, and I want to wrap it up because I'm gonna do a short show here, but sure. I really appreciate the book. I think, like as I mentioned before, your writing is legit, and
thank you.
I'm happy to promote it, and we'll put links to. Is it on Amazon?
Yes, it's on Amazon.
Okay. Do you have a website that's personal?
I do not have a personal site now.
You're not
so
a blogger?
It's just I'm a blogger. Yeah, I blog at medium.com/@Matthew O'Neil.
Okay. Now that Medium, that's the second time I've heard about Medium this week. Is that like some up and coming thing? Because it just seems to come out of nowhere for me.
It's gotten more popular. The cool thing about it is, aside from it just being like a huge site where a ton of like amateur and professional journalists write their stuff, I think there's been stuff that's actually been picked up by like the New York Times and other major news corporations for like opinion pieces and stuff like that. But right. But you can either post stuff and just have it out there for the web, or you can sort of market so that you make money off of it, and people need to have a subscription to buy certain stuff, to read certain things. I think there's also like audio formats for some of the articles too, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So,
okay, I'll check it out.
Yeah.
So just as some lighthearted human questions, I don't know if you have time to watch Netflix or movies or anything, but are you, is there something that you're into right now?
Yeah. So, and maybe this speaks more to, my background with theology and with religious studies and stuff, but I love the series American Horror Story.
Okay.
I've been following that series since it first came out, and the last 2 seasons in particular, which again, as someone else who has studied something similar to me, you might be interested in as well. The last season was American Horror Story Cult.
Okay.
And this series is American Horror Story Apocalypse. So if you've never watched the series before, it like each season is basically a standalone season. It's a different storyline. It's not necessarily a continuation from the previous ones.
Okay.
So they've had one in like an insane asylum, in a haunted house, in a circus. But the last 2 have been really cool. And actually, after I get off the phone with you, I'm probably going to start watching tonight's episode. So,
okay.
Yeah.
I'm not a big horror fan as far as a genre.
Okay.
Is it scary?
Yeah, American Horror Story. I mean, it's sort of in the title. So there are obviously horror elements to it, but some of it can be pretty lighthearted as well.
Okay. So the thing I hate most is like this eerie moment where it's still, it's quiet, and then then a loud noise and a scary
jump
face.
Scare type
jump
stuff.
scare. Is that what you call
that?
Yeah.
I think that's what they call it.
Not a big fan. In fact, 2 of my dear friends, they had 4 tickets to a haunted house here in Nashville, and they he called and said, "Hey, do you and Mindy like haunted houses?" And I'm like, "No, we don't." No, thank you. Find someone else to use those tickets. But
there's not as much of that in there. It's more like there's sort of something really intense going on, and then like, a character comes in or something happens that you just weren't expecting. So I mean, it's not, it's just like it's like a surprise element that comes up, and not a surprise like, oh my God, it catches you off guard and your heart stops.
Yeah, just didn't see that coming from a plot standpoint.
Exactly.
Oh, I can get into that. Did you ever watch Black Mirror?
I did. I love that series.
Oh my God. Loved it. And that's kind of what just came to mind as far as, I didn't see that coming. I mean, there's some stuff in there that I had usually on every episode, I would have to, when I turned it off, I would have to like take a walk around the block and decompress because it just fucked me up, man.
Yeah.
It's pretty shocking stuff, or at least thought provoking.
Yeah, for sure. And what's even weirder about that, did you ever see the episode where they had like the social currency, like, if you interact with someone and it's a positive experience, they would rate that?
Yeah.
I guess they're doing something like that in Japan now.
Yeah.
So like that blows my mind. It's like, no, watch Black Mirror and you'll see why this is a terrible idea.
Show you where this is going. It doesn't end well.
Yeah.
So what about like say music? What's some of the music that's on your playlist?
Oh man. So I'll tell you about what I've most recently downloaded.
Okay.
I recently downloaded the band AWOL Nation.
Okay.
They put out an album pretty recently, and I downloaded it because there was this one song they had that was like an acoustic. It was such a nice, like, sort of calm song with some good dynamics. Handyman, that's the name of the song.
Okay.
And it's just so different from the rest of the stuff they played, and so that motivated me to buy the album. And the rest of it, not too similar to it. Like, there's still like I felt like the guy has more of sort of a gritty, sort of almost scream-like type of singing that he does, and there's more of that in there. But that song really hooked me in. That aside, a band that I really, really like, and if anyone knows me, they know this. I've actually got a tattoo for this band.
Oh, wow.
It's called Bayside, and they release it's an acoustic album that's basically an anthology of like some of their bigger songs that they've released over the years. So just the interpretation that they put into some of the songs are really cool, where they're more of like a heavy, like hard rock type of band. Their lead guitar player is like, you would think he used to play for like Iron Maiden or something. He's insane. But hearing the acoustic interpretations is really interesting because they do like almost a reggae, like beach style vibe with one of the songs, which is really cool and gave me a different appreciation for the song. Aside from that, it's just like the album is just so like clean and nice, and like it just feels good to listen to it. So those have been my more recent musical interests.
And what was that one again?
The band's called Bayside. The album is called just Acoustic Volume 2.
And you've got a tattoo that says Bayside.
Well, and so if you look up the band, they have this logo, and it's an image of a bird sort of sitting on a branch or a flower of some kind. Their sort of catchphrase was Bayside is a cult, and they would have it on like all their t-shirts and their merch and stuff. And so they released this album a couple years ago that was just called Cult. And so when I got the tattoo, I showed the artist what I wanted. I'm like, okay, I want this bird. And I happened to show him the image, which was right on the cover of their album Cult. And so when he gave me the tattoo, it's the image of the bird with the word cult underneath it. So I don't know if that frightens people, or maybe why my social circle isn't so big right now. But
how visible is it? Where is it located?
It's on my right calf.
Oh, okay.
So if I'm wearing shorts, it's pretty visible. But if not, no one's. It's not the worst tattoo where I got it and afterwards I was like, probably should have looked that over first. But, Well,
I'm sorry to just make it all about me, but it's so fresh on my mind. When we were at this weekend retreat, one of the catchphrase that people started chanting, because these are legit people of integrity, adults from all over the United States, and they kept saying, "We are not a cult. And Cass is not our leader." and I was glad to not be a cult leader. I've been accused of it all my life, though. I mean, there was
really,
every church there was a church that I started, and it was back in Oklahoma in the late '90s, And, I just started it because, well, it was a youth church for one thing. It was a 501c3 outreach to teenagers. And some of the other teenagers in the region said, "So you go to that cult?" That kind of thing.
Jeez.
Well, in hindsight, it kind of was, because it was not that they were following me, but there is a cult of personality. They were drawn to the message of Jesus loving them unconditionally and all that, even though it's not true. I mean, it was always one of those things where I had to say, "Yeah, he loves you just as you are." And then in the footnote, asterisk or something said, "As long as you invite him into your heart. Then if you don't, he's going to torture you forever." Anyway. So Matthew, thank you so much. And let me ask you this in closing. Sometimes if somebody reads your book and they want to maybe engage with you personally, ask you a question or something like that, do you have an email or anything that is that you'd give out to the public?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can email me is probably the quickest route of getting a hold of me if you need to. My email address is just I'm Matt O'Neil at me.com. Okay.
I am Matt O'Neil at me.com.
Correct.
Okay. Well, just, in case somebody wants to write you, heck, they might want to ask you about your tattoo. I don't know.
You're totally welcome to.
Yeah, and I remember now when we talked to you the first time that you're sleeved, right?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. And I think last October I got my first tattoo. And,
no kidding.
On a whim, and this is not how you get tattoos. I know this to be true. In fact, a friend of mine who I called and I said, "What's a tattoo parlor you recommend?" And he told me, and he said, "What are you thinking?" And I said, "Well, I've got this thing." I told him the whole thing, and it had hit me that day that I wanted to get one. And he said, "Well, sleep on it, man. Don't do it all in the same day." And I didn't listen to him. I did it in the same day. And I've not regretted it. It's been a part of my life, and obviously will be for the rest of my life.
I've always been told the only tattoos you'll regret are either ones that you did not know the real meaning behind, or two, one that you were pressured into getting by someone else.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, it's neither of those, so I don't have any regrets.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, good to talk to you, man. I really appreciate it, and I hope the book does well. And
thank you.
And I'm happy to promote it and happy to chat with you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate you. Thanks for all you do and for letting me be on your show to talk about this nonsense for a little bit.
It's not nonsense. Don't downplay it, man. It's good stuff, and I appreciate it. Honestly, the reading of it, I'm interested. I have a commute. I go to Nashville every day, and it's pretty much a 1-hour trip one way. So audiobooks and podcasts really kind of save my sanity. So I'll be looking for it when it comes out on audio.
Okay. Well, I will email you the finished product once it is done.
Okay.
So you'll get it. No worries.
Right. Thanks, man.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
So that's my talk with Matthew O'Neil. I enjoyed that. He's a good guy. He seems like a great guy. He's obviously smart and capable of thinking laps and circles around the subjects that he finds intriguing. And if your life is enhanced by that kind of stretching and exploration and imagination, check him out on Amazon. He's got several books out there, and you can read his blog at medium.com/@Matthew O'Neil. That's medium.com/@Matthew O'Neil, and that's Neil with an N-E-I-L. If you'd like to write him personally, his email is I'mMattO'Neil@me.com. I'mMattO'Neil@me.com. Like anyone who puts themselves out there, he mixes it up sometimes and gets sideways with people now and then. And I don't know him or the details of such conflicts enough to know when and if he's right or wrong, blind or clairvoyant. But I experience him as genuine, kind, brilliant, and engaging. And I appreciate him coming on. We'll talk to you in 2 weeks. Have a great life.
I'm a sinner, I will consider I am my Father's son. I'm a sinner, I must consider I've never owned a gun. I'm a sinner, seasoned beginner, lucky to be alive. I'm a sinner, finished my dinner, now I can go outside. If only yesterday took place tomorrow, I'd pray for sleep and wake you and lift your head so I can fix your hand. I'll be your handyman. I'm not brittle, I'm just a little scared of your temperament. I'm not brittle, I'm just a little scared of my government. I'm not brittle, head hurts a little staring up overhead. I'm not brittle, I'm just a riddle born of white, blue and red. If only yesterday took place tomorrow, I'd pray for sleep and wake you and lift your head so I can fix your hand. I'll be your handyman.